Welcome, everybody, back to the morning meeting. Sean, Tim, and I guiding you through your Friday, the last program for all of us together before the Democratic Convention kicks off next week. We'll talk about that. Today, Vice President Harris has an event, 2:45 Eastern Time in Raleigh, North Carolina, her economic speech, widely previewed today. Wall Street Journal adds a housing element of the speech. We'll talk about that. Donald Trump at this time has no public event. I aired in the day book that I sent around earlier in saying JD Vance doesn't have an event. He does. He's in Wisconsin and Milwaukee doing a police event midday. Tim Walz, no public events, however. So that's that. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. If it's your first time watching, we hope you enjoy this program. It's about peace, love, and understanding. We're here to learn from each other, not to fight, and to have spirited conversation. If you don't like what somebody says, learn from it rather than denounce it or say you'll never watch again. And if you're watching on the two-way platform, welcome. If you'd like to get into the conversation, raise your electronic hand. We'll get a lot of you in today. And we'd love to get some new people in, as well as old regulars who we love as well. So just raise your hand and we'll start calling in you relatively soon. We're going to do something today. Regular viewers of this program know, for the 20-year history of the morning meeting, on Fridays, we always do Fast Track Friday, where we talk about quick answers to questions that are on everybody's mind. So guys, here we go. We're halfway through Kamala Harris's attempt to both embrace and Joe Biden and distance herself from Joe Biden. Yesterday, they did that joint event. Official White House event turned into a pep rally and a campaign event. And then today, she's solo doing her own economic plan. So halfway through, Tim, on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being abject failure, 10 being magical success, how is the vice president doing in that distance, not distance thing?
Yeah, I'm going to give her an 8 because I think it is a balancing act where you have to show some embrace of the previous administration. I think the event yesterday was a very good way to underscore accomplishments from the IRA, getting some of those drug prices down $6 billion over a year. But at the same time, she's looking forward. And so today we're having an event in North Carolina where she's going to roll out new policy. And the torch has been passed to her, and now she gets to lay out her vision. So it's a balancing act. It's tough. I think she's doing a good job.
8 of 10. Sean?
Yes.
This is why my class will be more challenging than Tim's. I will give her an incomplete. I think until you get through the DNC and do an interview, you haven't handed in the required paperwork for this course.
Okay, you're both wrong. It's an 8 on her own, but it goes up to a 9 with the assistance of the dominant media. Yesterday could not have gone better from her point of view, as I believe. All right, next question. Tim, the biggest threat to a successful Democratic convention where you are in Chicago, besides the threat of protests, which we all know about and the disruption that could cause, what's the next biggest threat to a successful convention?
I think it's low ratings. I think it's lack of interest. I think it's people not tuning in. I mean, the conventions or the 4-day infomercial that the parties have, it's one of the rare moments that break through, hopefully, where people are actually paying attention. Totally scripted. You get to deliver your message. So people always obsess about the ratings. I think we'll be okay. If people don't tune in, it's a disaster.
Okay, Sean?
I would actually disagree with Tim on the front. I think if you get low ratings, the less people know about her, the more she can continue to morph into whatever she wants. I'm not kidding. No. I'm being serious.
Come on.
Hey, look.
That seems disingenuous to me, but okay. What's your answer,
fine.
Sean?
I think that the biggest thing is look, when you do a convention, you want it's scripted. It's a 4-day TV show. The last thing you want is a bombshell investigation, something that takes you off track, something that makes you responsive. Or I know we've been talking about an RFK. Anything counter programming wise, we would send a team every year from the RNC and counter program. And the goal wasn't to try to dominate. It was just to screw with their head and to get them to take them off track. So anything that happens, an RFK endorsement, a bombshell interview or investigation that pops out, et cetera, would be not beneficial. Or something that talks about infighting, something that comes out about Biden, again, that takes them off track.
All right. I sort of agree. I don't know exactly what it would be, but I'd say the biggest danger to a successful convention is something involving either the Bidens or the Obamas.
Right. I think that's the Biden thing is the risk right now. What is
the one thing I would add there too is, like, if there is a crisis in the Middle East, right? If something foreign policy wise takes cameras away, that's a problem.
That's good.
And actually, I hat tip to Tim on that. I'll move that one to the top of my list. I mean, with this whole thing in Iran going after Israel, if they were to do something that really disrupted the messaging and cause them to respond, that could really throw things off.
I'm switching to that too. Good job, Tim. You got us all one over. All right. We normally try to be forward looking here, but we're going to look back a little bit. Tim, what's the best thing that happened to the Harris campaign this week?
I'm going to go with the Biden event. I think you saw the outpouring of goodwill that's going to happen at the convention too. I mean, like the amount of emotion that is there in the Democratic base, in Harris, in Biden, is palpable. And I think there is so much appreciation for him that is underappreciated and what is helping her ride the wave that she is riding. And their first event was they knocked it out of the park.
Sean, best thing that happened to the Harris campaign?
Lack of accountability, the continued ability to ride. I'm sorry, Tim. The lack of ability, the ability to continue to ride without any sort of deep dive into their policies, accountability, interviews.
Mine's similar to that. She crossed another week off the calendar to run out the clock. Another week of the narrative being that Trump's out of control, lost his mind, can't get a message, and that she's leading a movement. And that even increased a little bit this week. This notion, Doug Sosnick wrote about it. Doug Sosnick's got a great memo out. Doug Sosnick, the Democratic political strategist, a two-way regular. We're going to put it in the chat both on YouTube and on two-way to read it. And Doug raises this notion that maybe she's going to end up leading the fourth movement of Doug's career, Reagan, Obama, and Trump. Big deal. So, yeah. Okay. Best thing that happened to the Trump campaign this week, Tim?
Yeah, I think the ability to say crazy things and not have it be picked up by the press because there is so much to cover. He was at an event with Miriam Adelson talking about how she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and much like veterans who served who get the other Medal of Freedom, the Congressional Medal of Freedom, she turned out okay because she wasn't shot at, she wasn't wounded. I mean, just like insane stuff that I have not seen covered anywhere today. Because it was covered on Morning Joe, I'm told. Sean, best thing that happened to the Trump campaign?
I think yesterday's press conference showed that the message of the economy and staying focused on economic message is getting through to him.
You mean it might get through to him, since he also in that same press conference said he had a right to insult her personally.
But at the end of the day, look, from the visuals, he had the visuals out, he had the charts out. I've never seen Trump as disciplined as he was and focused on a singular issue as he was.
I agree. And I think to me, the best thing is they've gotten the point that they have to give him props, human or otherwise, to get him to focus on a single issue. And I predict you'll start to see events like with victims of crime, victims of immigrant crime, et cetera, to get him to at least from a lot of the events stay on message. All right. Tim, worst thing that happened to the Harris campaign this week?
I'm going to flip Sean's answer here a little bit. I think there is a building pressure from the media to demand interviews, and it's seeping a little bit more into coverage. So I think that campaign continues from the press and from some voters. And that, look, we're going to the convention. She's going to have a full week to deliver a message there. But I think it's going to hit a pitch. And hopefully she meets her deadline of, she's going to sit down by the end of the month and do an interview. But I do think you're hearing more and more about it.
The Jen Psaki interview is right around the corner. Sean?
I don't know. I mean, look, I'm not looking to give her a pass, but I'm not sure she had it. As I said at the beginning, it's an incomplete week. So I don't think she had nothing that stands out. I think Waltz had a worse week than she did, if you want to look at it holistically. But she got away with a lot this week. And if from just a pure political strategic standpoint, I'll give her a credit on that. I don't think she had a big bad moment. And that's not all because of her. It's because you have a fawning press for her.
Yeah. I think the worst thing, and again, it's super incremental. I mostly agree with you, Sean. And it's along the lines of what Tim said. It's the green shoots, just as Tim says, green shoots on demands for her to start doing interview. I see green shoots in the press of people asking, explain these flip-flops, explain the repudiation of all these past progressive positions, and looking at her record in a way that is potentially going to create some tension. All right, lots to choose from here, Tim. Worst thing that happened to the Trump campaign? You may not use the word Lewandowski in your answer.
Okay. I think the worst thing that happened to the Trump campaign is that Sean thought that he had a good week, or that there was a best thing about the Trump campaign. That press conference was a win for him. I mean, did he read a topper in and out for 30 minutes and an hour long plus press conference? I guess that's a plus because you're doing a comparison with Harris and her not holding a press conference. But he can't drive a message. Like the message does not come through. So you can give him that. You can put Cheerios and bacon rotting meat behind him.
So what's the worst thing?
Yeah, it's his press conference. It's his continued inability to stay on message.
Okay, Sean, worst thing for the Trump campaign?
Do the same rules apply to me?
You can't use the word Lewandowski. Yes, it's barred from the program.
Okay.
Today.
I mean, I think anytime that there's rumors, I think the president addressed them yesterday at the press conference. But anytime you start having rumors of internal process shakeup, that's not helpful. I think he at least nipped it in the bud at the top, but it's just those process stories are never helpful.
The worst thing to me is something for Trump campaign is something mostly subterranean, where you're starting to hear from the strategist community, the donor community, and the political elected community. Basically, okay, what's a fall like when we're pretty sure Trump's going to lose? Where do we put the money? Where do we put the emphasis?
Yeah, but can I just, and again, I don't mean to go back and forth on this. We dealt with this in 2016. And so, everybody gets nervous, but at the end of the day, the president will he will come through when he needs to. And I think that we have a long way to go. But the donors always get a little antsy.
But it's not just the donors; it's some members of Congress, it's some governors. It's just I didn't say it's cataclysmic in ending the campaign.
No, I know.
To me, it's not great. It just gives them more stuff to deal with. All right, now one fun or interesting thing to watch for. Tim.
I'm curious to see what the reaction. Maybe this isn't so fun. I guess this is maybe not the most fun thing. But what is the reaction going to be to Harris's policy rollout? People have been clamoring for policy. We need some policy. She's putting out a white paper today. She'll do it in a disciplined way. Topper at the beginning of a rally, standard message. So does that satiate? Does that matter?
She clearly wants a lot of attention for doing it on August Friday afternoon.
We're on it. Look, we're on a compressed timeline here, man.
Sure, understood. Sean, fun thing to watch for.
Yeah, well, this just tells you how I define fun. I have been playing with the Electoral College map. You see that Tim Walz is headed to Nebraska. I did this on my podcast the other day. It is amazing, and I know I normally hate this kind of stuff, but I am fascinated by the scenarios in which the Electoral College comes out 268, 270, or 269, 269, and how important Nebraska 2 could potentially be. I mean, I don't think Maine 2 is going to be an issue, but I think Nebraska 2 could be an issue. And when you start doing these, like I said, I did it on my podcast where I went state by state, and it was unreal. And then the other thing is, if you ever should, and I know this is like really usually pisses off normal political people, but when you get to a 269 and you look at the future House, you realize why Alaska and that runoff with Mary Peltola and the ranked choice voting could have a huge effect on, because Alaska will get one vote as every other state would if there were a tie in Electoral College. Anyway, I'm fascinated by the math right now.
Can I just say very quickly to add to
that?
that?
Yeah,
just it's because Sean is more interesting than me in this answer. If you watch the Nebraska legislature, there was a proposal there to change how they allocate their electoral votes, and that could be cataclysmic. They're still in session. They're doing budgetary things right now, and that talk around that has died. But it is something to continue to watch, because there could be a very late play there to change how they allocate their electoral votes, and that could be a huge problem.
All right. My thing to watch for is wait to see where Michelle Obama is speaking during the convention, what night and what she'll say. All right, here we go. Two Davids.
Wait, so you don't think she's going to accept the nomination on Thursday night?
Dick Morris is sure she is. All right. The two Davids are here. David J, David P, David J first. Remind everybody where you're from, who you're supporting, and ask away.
Okay, this is Dave from Dewey Beach. I have a question for Sean today. Although I'm a Democrat enthusiastically supporting Kamala Harris and enjoying the luxurious press honeymoon that she's been having for these past couple of weeks. My question is for Sean, given all the time you've spent working directly with Trump. I feel like Trump's shtick, if I'll call it, of kind of insults and stuff, has just kind of worn out, and it doesn't work with people who are persuadable voters anymore. That shtick is just kind of, it's 8 years old. People are just tired if they're persuadable. And I feel like he really needs to be able to come out and not one-liners, but in more detail, talk about his policy differences if he wants to get traction with those people. And you, having worked with him so closely, I want your take on whether you think he's really capable in a more detailed way of really talking about his policies and what he really wants to do.
Yeah. Well, first, David, Friday, Dewey Beach, you're making me get excited. Have dreams of either the rudder, starboard, or anyway. Look, I don't actually disagree with you. And I think that's kind of why I said when Mark asked what the highlight of the week was, I think what yesterday showed was probably the clearest attempt by him and his campaign to get him to recognize that he is who he is. And he's not going to stop the personal stuff. He addressed that at the top of the press conference yesterday. He feels what I forgot how he phrased it, the obligation to attack her. I think it was how he put it. That is in his id. It's not going to ever stop. The question is, can you get more of the policy and less of that? And I'm with you. I mean, it's not a question of, it's more of a, here are the persuadable voters. Here are the tens of thousands of people over the 7 states that are going to matter. What do they care about? And it's not an additional insult that's going to put them over the top, right? They know that play. They want to know specifics. And so I would argue just on a purely, do you want to win or lose situation? But in any case, I think we agree on that. And I think, frankly, as I said yesterday's call, it's not just sort of limited to some ideology. Vivek Ramaswamy and others who are very conservative are pointing out the exact same thing, because I think there's a general agreement that his strength is that contrast on policy.
David, thank you. Come back regularly. All right, some breaking news. The best kind of breaking news always involves 501c4s. Anybody in the news business knows that. Trump campaign announces today, I don't know why, the formation of the Donald Trump Trump-Vance 2025 Transition Inc. Co-chairs, Linda McMahon, billionaire Howard Lutnick. The press release doesn't call him a billionaire, but I'm filling that in. And then the honorary chairs are J.D. Vance, Donald Trump Jr., and Eric Trump. Trump children, Don in particular, I'm told, have been told for a while, are very interested in making sure that this government is staffed differently than the previous Trump administration. And so I'm not sure exactly what Don Jr.'s role will be as compared to Linda McMahon and Howard Lutnick. But Sean, what does that listing say to you? Why are they doing it now?
Actually, the irony is the most important thing is that the actual release of it. During 2016, Trump wanted nothing to do with discussion about the transition or planning. And the idea that he's buying into it, I think, shows a different mentality there. Second, obviously, the subheading, who's involved. I think Linda McMahon, very strong choice. She's been extremely involved in both the administration and then as SBA chair, but then America First PAC and now America First Policy Institute. So she has been very involved in his orbit on a governing standpoint, on a campaign standpoint, and on a policy standpoint going forward. I think I'll just leave it to your reporting. I mean, to your summation on Don and Eric. I think they've been very concerned about it, and this reflects that.
I wonder if they convince him to announce it to just add a jolt of like appearance of confidence, like we're going to win this thing. If we didn't think we were going to win. All right, David.
Good morning,
everybody. Where are you? Who are you supporting? What's on your mind?
I'm from Missouri. I'm supporting Trump. And the best campaign in my lifetime I've ever seen is 1988 with Roger Ailes. And he picked out 2 or 3 specific issues and just hammered them. That silly ACLU with the American flag, the Willie Horton issue, which I think was independent expenditure, but I'm sure he was involved in it.
The ad was an independent expenditure, but they talked about it separately from the ad.
And they matched the campaign with the ad each day. So the news media was not confused on what to report on. They only had one thing to report on. Trump needs to stay out of the way. He can get a 30-second ad together on an issue like transgender, which is an 80-20 issue. The St. Louis paper all week has been playing up some silly bathroom issue in the public schools where big money is spent on different kind of bathrooms. I don't have the patience to get into the balls and strikes of it, and I think it's perfect for him to do a 30-second ad. He could do an illegal immigrant ad where somebody was murdered by an illegal immigrant, which would be equivalent to the Willie Horton deal. Something will happen somewhere, and there's already been things where they can invent a tank ad or similar to that.
Right. So David, your point is they should be doing great ads that are matched up with the Daily Message. Is that your point?
Right. And the Daily Message might not be best presented by Trump. They have surrogates that could get out there, the congressional people on local TV, etc. Trump isn't good at that.
David, do you think Trump's on track to win right now?
I think he will win. No, he's not on track to win. But like he did in 2016, he got his act together the last 2 weeks and was just brilliant the last 2 weeks and hammered home the message. I think he will probably do that. She's very weak. I know she's going to hide from the media, but I think the 30-second ads and the rest will, she's very beatable. Newt Gingrich said opening day when Biden quit that she's a San Francisco Democrat. She should be defeated by like McGovern was and all. And I think Trump certainly has the money to do that in the 6 or 7 states on TV.
Right. David, you know what made Trump a particular genius in the last 2 weeks was his running mate, Jim Comey. Sean or Tim? Any questions for David?
He stayed out of the news the last 2 weeks, though.
Yeah, he did.
I mean, he didn't step on Jim Comey.
He did. You're right. He did.
The only thing I would just say is that, like, look, this goes back to sort of both the Twitter question that usually gets asked and the previous comment. He is still who he is, and the idea of him allowing other people to take charge is just never going to happen. And so it's not a disagreement; it's more of an acknowledgement of reality.
Yeah. David, do you think that when Trump is out there like doing a press conference like he did yesterday, is that a good thing? Does he do a good job driving a message?
Probably not. I think he's better left to the paid media and surrogates, and they should keep his voice off TV and just show pictures of him doing something that looks to be halfway important.
Riding horse. David, thank you. How'd you learn about a morning meeting?
I've been watching it from the beginning. My son's a friend of Sean's, and it's a great show. I love it.
Thank you. It's the friend of Sean, not a friend of Sean.
Oh.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Thank you for joining. That's kind of ribbing we do here. Stephen, unmute. Remind those who don't know who you're for, where you are, and ask away.
Good morning. I am from suburban New Orleans, St. Tammany Parish, Mandeville, Louisiana, particularly. Trump supporter. I guess the point I'd like to get across is there's a lot of commentary about Trump not staying on message. When you agree to give 1.5, 2-hour interviews, discussions, a lot of content is going to be discussed. And I do think that Trump does a decent job of focusing on policy. Where I would advise him is when the legacy media ask him these type of gotcha questions that aren't on policy, I would just brush those off and not go down that rabbit hole. That's what he does. But I think if you listen to yesterday's press conference, there was scores of policy issues that were discussed, tons of them. And to Sean's point, Trump's going to be Trump. And I want Trump to be Trump. Right. I think that's part of his attraction, quite frankly. But if I were advising his campaign, I would say, don't go down the rabbit hole when the legacy media tries to bait you. And secondly, what I would do if I were him on September 4th, I would have a town hall forum, invite Kamala to come, hosted by Fox. She won't. I think that's where Trump's humanity really shows. I think if he and Kamala both did a town hall debate, that environment lends itself well to Trump. He comes across a normal guy, very reasonable, very relatable, and he doesn't come across a politician. That's my
two things. Thank you for that. 2 things. Number one, do you think Trump's on track to win right now or not?
I think that the momentum due to the legacy media's continued coronation of Kamala is definitely helping her. I do think when the dust settles, I think he's going to bring it home. I honestly do. I don't think that's pie in the sky. I try to be objective in my thinking. Just because I'm a Trump guy doesn't mean I agree with him 100% on the way he presents himself and that type of thing. But I do think he's going to close out strong because policy has to come up at some point, and I believe her policies are just not attractive to the majority of the country.
All right, I'm going to turn you over to my colleagues, but first, as always, friendly reminder, it's Kamala, like the punctuation mark, Kamala.
Correct. Right, that is not intentional, but I appreciate the correction.
I didn't think it was. Just always like to have everybody say it right.
Sure.
Respect. Yep, all good. Thank you, Stephen. Tim, anything you want to ask Stephen?
No. I mean, I think just to the point that there are gotcha questions from the legacy media. I do think a lot of it is the problem with Trump is it's unprovoked. It is self-inflicted. He hears something and then he goes down a rabbit hole. It's not that he's pushed on something. Nobody asked him to comment on that her Black and Indian heritage, but he did, and then it became a thing. And it's common with him. So I don't feel like they are legacy media gotcha questions. I feel like he can't control himself.
Yeah, two quick points. One is I think, and Stephen mentioned this. I mean, he is who he is. Part of his attractiveness to so many voters is that he is not scripted. He says things that no politician would say. He doesn't adhere to talking points in a normal way, and he does a meandering hour and a half press conference. No one does that. And I think that there's an attractiveness to too many people who have had Washington jam down their throats, overlook them, tell them a bunch of gobbledygook. And that's what I think, frankly. And then the other thing that you said, one of the things that I started to think about as you were talking about this, and it ties back to what we talked about at the beginning of the call. I think there is how they respond next week. There is something always, in pulling a rabbit out of a hat next week. Does Trump show up somewhere? Does he do something? Does he try to disrupt their programming in some way? That will be very interesting to me. And I sort of was putting all those comments together as people were saying. I'm thinking that there's an opportunity next week for the Trump campaign and for Trump specifically that could be both helpful and hurtful.
John, what would be the best stunt you could do?
Well, first of all, I mean, what is it? It's kind of like I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I'd be very careful about showing up, though. I'll tell you that. I'd have to think about that.
How about going back to Ohio?
What's
The
in
scene
Ohio?
of his greatest,
What am I missing?
the train derailment.
That could be a good one. Show up in East Palestine. I mean, I think that might be smart. And talk about those forgotten men and women. That would be along the lines. Do some, but I would actually do more of an economic thing. I mean, why? I mean, obviously, with all due respect to the tragedy that occurred there with that train derailment, I would think about how to tie this in, or go to the border and do a big border event.
Or how about this? How about pull a TV twister-rooney and go to the streets of San Francisco, ride the cable car, Coit Tower.
He
go
could
to Swenson's.
he could go to a different Trump club where the membership fee is like, hundreds of thousands of dollars and stand in front of groceries again. That could be a thing.
Good, Tim. Good, Tim. Hey, Stephen, how'd you learn about two-way and morning meeting?
I follow you on X, and I'm a viewer of Newsmax, and I see you on
Awesome.
the
Thank you,
Newsmax
man.
network a great amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Excellent. All right. Let's get one more in here real quick. James, come on in. Remind everybody who you're backing. Tell us where you are and go on ahead.
Good evening from Japan. I am supporting Harris. I want to make a quick note because Ohio, konbanwa.
Konbanwa. Very good.
So, honto desu ne.
Honto. It's one of the things I want to say about the platform quickly, because I know you've gotten a lot of flack for having different voices on. When you live abroad, you get a good, keen understanding of how divisive and toxic American media is and how socially destructive it is. And I have been listening in on these calls and hearing a lot of people who I vehemently disagree with and coming away with more understanding and compassion than I have in a long time. So it's kind of humanizing the opposition, and it's been genuinely therapeutic for me. So I just want to thank you guys. And I don't know why you're screwing up a proven business model, but it's good civil discourse. So my question, dovetailing a little from the media conversation you were having yesterday, it seems you are of the position, and I understand it, the media is uniquely deferential and favorable to Harris right now. Would you say it's kind of similar to the Obama 08 relationship in the primary?
Even worse, because the media liked John McCain. So this is even more the disparity.
Well, I say comparing it in the primary between Clinton and Obama, which seemed to be more favorable for Obama.
That was the worst until now.
Okay. So let's say, thinking back to the Obama relationship, it was very hard. They didn't have much to throw at him, but what they did, it was very hard for anything to break through. The only thing I really remember breaking through was the Reverend Wright story, right? So let's say you have some negative points. Fast forward to 2024 with TikTok and YouTube and all these other mediums. Do you think you still need the participation and buy-in from the mainstream, all of the mainstream media, to effectively damage an Obama-like campaign? And if you do, what could that be for Harris, aside from a really bad debate performance or a bad interview? What could that be in the next 80 days?
Right. Excellent question. I'll take first stab. I think you do. If you don't have the dominant media as either validating it or at least serving as a conveyor belt, as they did with the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, it stays ghettoized into red media, and it never affects voters in a serious way. It can energize the base, but it can't transform the race. I think she's, as I've said previously, she's just not been vetted at this level. There's going to be stuff that comes out about her almost certainly. Whether that rises to the level of putting her in the barrel or not, I don't know. Tim, Sean?
I mean, I think it isn't.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was
I was just going to say,
Tim,
go.
it is, to your point about social media, it is very interesting the degree to which campaigns feel like they can now circumvent dominant media and still deliver a message. I think that is part of what the Harris campaign is doing right now. She had to sit down with Tim Walz yesterday where they're just talking to each other for 10 minutes, doing an interview, introducing each other. So I think that's part of it. I also will just say, like, on the media bias question, it is, the media latches on to upward trajectory and momentum. And I think they have done that with Harris. And I think they also latch on to people who are struggling and needle them. And I think that's happening with Trump.
So I just
even when Trump was riding high, Melania was never profiled favorably by the New York Times, for example.
Since Tim did me the favor of bringing up that discussion they had yesterday, I can't imagine. I mean, this goes to your point, James. Like, Tim Walz is talking about eating white tacos, and even Kamala was like, "What's a white man's taco?" I'm thinking to myself, if that discussion had occurred between J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, it would have been we would have all been mocking it today. It's not just what the media covers, it's what they don't. And the idea that got a pass yesterday, as silly as it seems, I mean, we get everything from policy discussions that don't happen, interviews that don't happen, to now he can make a comment like that. Their records get completely overlooked. So it's not just what gets covered, it's what doesn't. And then the last thing I would just say, because another good point that I was going to make today is the engagement of influencers in this cycle is I think the new thing. It's being able to have not just have a conversation with yourself, but you're seeing both campaigns really court influencers in a way that has never been able to happen in the past. And I'm glad to see, especially on my side, who have an aversion to a lot of this, to embrace people who have a big following to come into a campaign and document them and report on them. Because I think those relationships are a lot stronger than the ones that people sometimes have with the media.
James, domo arigato gozaimashita.
Arigato gozaimasu.
Sayonara.
Oyasumi nasai.
Mata. All right. So 2 programming notes. 4:30 Eastern time today on Two-Way. Jordan Peterson, one of the most influential thinkers in this world, in the Western world. We'll have a discussion about the campaign. He's got super interesting things to say. I spoke to him yesterday about Kamala Harris, about where this election stands. We'll be taking your questions, streaming live on YouTube and then on the Two-Way platform. 4:30 today. Look forward to that, and love for lots of you to come, whether you're a Peterson fan or not. In the spirit of this platform, you're going to want to hear what he has to say, and we'll have a great conversation. And then, of course, Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. Central, where Tim and I will be live from Manny's Deli or somewhere in Chicago. We'll have all week during the convention, we'll have the morning meeting, again, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 Central. So we'll see you then. Gentlemen, have a great, restful weekend. Thanks to everybody for participating. And we'll see you at 4:30 today and then 9 a.m. Monday, and perhaps over the weekend as news warrants here on Two-Way.